It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. And when I say live, I mean kind of live. I'm out of town, and I shot this video a month or so ago. Jim Thacker called, said, "Hey, I'm in L.A., want to go grab lunch?" And we did. I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to put him to work and pick his brain. So I had him jump in, and we did a quick little impromptu interview, which was really good. Thacker's always great, has great information. The green screen, not so good on that episode because I kind of rushed to put everything together and didn't dial it in. But I hope you enjoy the episode. I think you'll learn a lot. Jim's a great guy to learn from. Here in the Taxi studio today with my friend Jim Thacker. He's a musician, a composer, a producer, very, very busy in the land of sync, licensing music for TV and film, and commercials, and I want to talk about that in a bit. Anyway, he's in town. We just went to lunch, so thought we'd do a little ad hoc not officially a Taxi TV, but we'll find some good stuff. But Jim was telling me over lunch how he has had groups of people in Nashville come over to his place, and they're desirous of being involved in sync. And you were telling me that they don't know what they don't know. Can you explain maybe some of the stuff that you told them that if you're just starting out in sync that you should be aware of?
Yeah. And it's interesting. We just did a conference in Nashville, and there was probably 30 songwriters, and I kind of took a poll in the room, and probably 5 people had any experience with sync. None of them had placements, and I'd say I asked if they had heard about Taxi and things like that. Maybe 5 or 10 people said.
Good job, Jim.
I'm always advocating.
Thank you.
And they, I think 5 or 6 of the people out of 30 did. And then, then I started the discussion of sync and how things work. And I would say, it's hard to say numbers, but probably 80% didn't know what like a split sheet was. We talk about split sheets a lot, or work for hires. 2 of the artists, kind of fast forwarding at the end of the event, I really liked one of the songs, and I wanted to potentially work with the song. I said, hey, this is a great song. And one of the artists that wrote the song wasn't signed up with BMI or ASCAP. So those kind of things came up during the course of this conference, and I'm like, really, there, people want to get into sync, but there is so much to learn, and you talk about Taxi TV. That's one thing you always talk about, all of the ins and outs of sync, and there is a lot to learn, and there's a learning curve there, but there are basics, and I think the things I just mentioned are some of the basics: split sheets, work for hires, joining a PRO, which is ASCAP, BMI. Get those. It's really that legal side of things, that business side of things. Because writing great music and becoming great songwriters, yes, you got to do that. But then when it comes time to do something with that music in like the world of sync, you have to have that business side, and that understanding of how it works has to be there. And some of that, like, it took me a number of years to understand all of that when I first jumped into the sync world. And that, again, that's why
you'd gone to I don't want to name it, but a prestigious music school that everybody is well aware of, and you never learned any of that stuff there, right?
No, they didn't talk anything. They talked a little bit about publishing and things like that, and back then they talked about copywriting your songs and things like that, but nothing about the world of sync or how it all works, or, and then we got into, in this conference, we also got into other things that you need to know about: what's non-exclusive versus exclusive, what's perpetuity versus reversions. There's so many things on that business legal side that it has taken me years to learn, and kind of, trial by error. Mm-hmm. But that is why I'm an advocate of things like Taxi, because you guys do that education. It's such a great education you guys have. And it's easy to learn if the information and the education is there. But again, even in this college that I went to, I didn't learn about any of that stuff. I learned how to play my instrument and learned about music theory and mixing and doing, production and things like that. But no talk of music sync. I don't know of any college that does that. There probably is somewhere, but I'm not aware of any university program that even addresses it beyond the publishing side of things. Yeah, they have classes about that. But those things are primary, and I think a lot of songwriters, rightly so, focus on writing and coming up with songs and producing music. That takes time, but you do have to spend, I think, an equal amount of time on the on the business side.
Nobody wants to because it's not fun.
It's not as fun.
It's not sexy.
It isn't. It isn't.
I get it, but it is. That's the difference between somebody who's going to make a living doing sync and somebody who's just creating great music.
I think so. Yep.
Let's talk about. I believe that people hang on to the old paradigm of the record industry. If you just have 3 great songs, you'll get signed. The gates will open up. Your life will change. You get the private jet, the briefcase full of money, the gorgeous women backstage. We've all heard, that's...
Where do I sign up for this?
Not here.
Tell me when you find out.
And people are still stuck in that mindset and think that those things apply to the world of sync, whereas I would contend that sync is about having the right music that solves a problem for a music supervisor or a production music library that's pitching to a music supervisor. And the problem is we need music to amplify the emotion of the scene. We need music to amplify the mood, to make the action more exciting, to tell everybody that we're in Italy, to tell everybody that we're in 1945. There are all those things that music helps establish in picture. But yet so many people think if a music supervisor just hears my song and they recognize how incredibly awesome it is, they'll put it in that scene in a movie. Can you explain why that is wrong-headed thinking?
Yeah, and it really is. What's interesting is when I started with Taxi, probably for the first 2 or 3 years, I had that mindset of I'm creating what I thought was good music or great music, which is always subjective. But I thought, okay, my music it may be on par because I'd been doing it a long time. But I'd send music in thinking, I think the mindset was somebody's going to hear music and discover me. They're going to hear me and discover me and be like, oh, this is great. I got to work with this guy. Now, there is an element of that potentially. Like, I love when I hear a great artist or great songs, and I will reach out to them. But I think the important point, basically on what you're saying, is that it is more of a world where your music is not the focal point, let's say. It can be in certain scenes and in certain usage, but a lot of times, and I said this at the conference I did that I talked about, it is essentially wallpaper. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think I mean it in the best way. It's like you are supporting something, and like, or maybe I'm a bass player. Growing up, I was a bass player. It's like a bass player. If the bass isn't there, you notice it.
Right.
But most people don't notice the bass player on stage. They notice the singer or the guitar player or the drummer before the bass player. Bass player is the last guy picked, right?
Unless you're Paul McCartney.
Exactly. There's exceptions. But if the bass player took off, you'd be like, wow, something's really wrong here. Kind of the same in sync, where if there was no music in a film, I mean, there's a few films I can think of that didn't have any music or no music. No Country for Old Men. Mm-hmm. And that it's cool, but it's strange because it's like there's so little music in this. And when there was a little piece of music, it's super effective. But most films have a ton of music going on. Almost all the time, it's either score or songs. And so you really are playing that supporting role that you talked about, right? So the mindset of going from somebody's going to discover me, my music is great, to me almost goes to my music needs to be great in this situation. It needs to support that scene. And there is a wide range of music when you think about it. Like when people are driving around in a car in a film and the song's playing in the background. It's background. It's what they call source music. But sometimes there's a montage and that song's right up front. A show like Grey's Anatomy, I mean, those songs are featured and it's kind of cool. And the music is a huge part of that scene. So music can range in usage within a film. Ads, music's pretty important. That song has to sell that product and make people think it's cool and has the energy. So music plays a pretty important role, but at all times, even in those bigger situations, it's supporting the visual. It's doing something. In sync is, I mean, the word sync means sync to picture, synchronization to picture, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to have the picture to have sync music. So it is a mindset. And it's interesting because I did have that mindset that somebody was going to discover my music and think I was great and want to work with me all the time. And it became more that the music that I did was appropriate to support what they did. So that's when I found more success with my music, was when I wrote the music with that in mind. And and had music that would support what was going on and support the picture, rather than thinking still good songs, still great songs, but just a little different mindset.
You and I have a mutual friend. He's a music supervisor, and He's not the only person to say this, but he says it pretty much every time we have him on a panel or on stage at the Road Rally Taxis conference, if you've never been. And he always says, you're not in the music business. If you're making music for film and TV, you're not in the music business. You're in the film and TV business.
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's like the set decorator, the production designer, literally down to the people that walk by on a sidewalk to add atmosphere in a scene. Music plays a role. And as you just said, the role could vary between being featured because the lyrics of the song are telling a story that completes the montage, which is usually a silent scene where somebody just found out that they've got 6 months to live, and they're reflecting back in their entire life, and the song lyric works for that.
Yep.
So, but you mentioned TV commercials. And I know you've had some success in the last year and a half, 2 years, by getting your music in some really good TV commercials. Oftentimes, another mutual friend, which is John Pearson, as your co-writer on it. What do people need to know about making music that has a higher probability of success working in commercials? Is there a formula or any basic rules of the game or anything?
Yeah, commercials is different. It is like, I think in film and TV, it can be more of just a song, like a true song, verse, chorus, things like that. In the commercial world, that works as well at times, but I hear, at least in some of the few songs I've had success in commercials with, I call them like catchphrase or action items. It's always like a really strong hook phrase. Like I always use the example of the last year Hertz had a commercial, and their thing was "Here we go," and that's almost all you heard.
Which commercial?
Hertz.
Oh,
the car rental
okay,
company.
yeah.
And their big theme last year was "Here we go," and literally that's the only line I remember. I think it was there could have been. I don't know if that was a full song or if somebody wrote it for Hertz or whatever.
Right.
But they used that campaign at least for a year. Whoever wrote that little song made
money.
some money. And and it was like a guitar thing, And it was like do 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 do. It was like this guitar line, and then at the very end, Tom Brady, I think, was their spokesman. So that tells you they spent some money on the commercial.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, they, all you heard was "Here we go," and that was it.
Which was the lyric.
So the lyric.
Okay.
So that
Did
shows
they play that in the clear by itself? Just
Yes,
here we go.
yes.
Okay.
Like after the dialogue was done, all of a sudden you hear "Here we go," and that was the end. It was kind of a stinger, and we could talk about stinger endings, and it just faded out, and that's the end. And I took note of that, and that's very common in commercials when you think about it. It's like, "Look at me," or the word "wow" was used a lot for a while, or "Here we go." It's all action items. And it's funny because one day I wasn't even thinking about music and commercials, and I had the TV on or something, and there was this really strange sounding action-oriented song. And I literally, my head turned and I looked at the TV, and I'm like, that's what they want you to do, right? And it was Apple. And Apple uses all these sometimes kind of crazy sounding vocalese things, that catch your ear and you got to turn towards it. And I think that's like a whole psychology. So in the commercial world, to try to kind of encapsulate that, to me, it's action-oriented lines a lot of times. Like "Here we go." Target uses them all the time because they're trying to get people in motion. There are exceptions, of course, but to me, the middle ground, kind of the sweet spot, is that kind of thing. Like action item lyrics, pretty energetic music, mid to up tempo most of the time. And there is a lot of usage of like indie pop, indie rock guitar stuff, all the way to like hip hop is used, of course, quite a bit in commercials, depending. Sports commercials are a lot of hip hop. So there is that stylistically. Not to say like singer-songwriter, Subaru uses a lot of, Americana singer-songwriter stuff. So there's homes within commercials for other kinds of music. But again, if you want that sweet spot with the most success, to me, it's action-oriented, indie pop, and hip hop kind of things that work stylistically for commercials.
I completely agree with you, and I personally observed that verses don't matter because they rarely, if ever, get used.
Yep. Yeah.
And absolutely, the chorus gets used, but keep your word count down to like 3 to 5 words, and you dramatically increase the chance. If your chorus is wordy, you only have 30 seconds for the whole commercial.
Right.
And the music doesn't necessarily even fill the whole 30 seconds.
Yep.
It might start out with the indie pop guitar lick, and then a voiceover, or some actors come in and they do 10 or 15 seconds of what they do. And then Here We Go pops up in the middle, then back to the actors, and then Here We Go at the end. So they're looking for snippets. The fantasy of your entire 3-minute or 3.5-minute song playing throughout the whole commercial, probably go lifetime and never ever have that happen.
Yeah.
So I like your advice. Action stuff. Here we go. Girls' night out.
Never gonna stop. I'm trying to think of some ones I heard that I took note of lately. Like, we're gonna throw down, things like that. It's all action, short kind of titles. Like, really, you're right, kind of short, just to the point. And time again, and that's the thing. That's what I do to kind of keep up with what's going on. I'll just turn on TV and watch the commercials. A lot of us don't watch the commercials; we fast forward. But I literally watch the commercials and really take note. What are they using?
I do the same thing, and I've got my phone in my hand, Shazamming to see who the act is and what the song is, and then I'll go listen to the full song and go, oh, now I see why they used it and why they cut those parts.
And you'll find out, like you said, it did have a verse. It did have a lot more lyrics, but they'll trim it down.
Yeah.
And we've talked before about this. I've had several commercials where it had a great guitar part or a great vocal even, and they used the bass and drums stem. Literally, they just took, and I'm like, oh, I got this commercial, and I'm like listening to them, like, that's just my bass and drums and bass part.
But you still got paid the same.
You still got the sync fee, and great, and no hard feelings at all. But it's interesting, and that was probably all because they probably put the whole song in. The song sold it. They liked the song, and then in the editing room, they probably got it in there and said, ooh, that vocal's in the way of dialogue. So they trimmed the vocal out, not even thinking they would initially. And then they that guitar part's in the way. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, that sits well. Well, it's just the drums and bass. So I'm sure that's what happens. They like the song. So they're being sold on the song because they like the energy or they like the vocalist. But it's funny, sometimes they might not even use that vocal. Because in the editing room, they realize, oh, it's kind of in the way. We still love the song, so they're going to use it. Right. But unfortunately, the vocal has to go, or they only use Here We Go at the end. So I'm positive. I'm not an editor, and I haven't been in those rooms that much, but I know that that's what's going on. Because they must have loved the original song that you hear when you Shazam it, to the point of they just love the song, and they grabbed it and put it up there. And then they start trimming it back or asking for stems or whatever it might be. But yeah, it's interesting. So I think in short, that you're absolutely right. Like, short, to the point action lines are always used. So if you want to kind of write for the sweet spot or to maximize placement in commercials, keep it to those, And it's crazy because there was one, what was it? And it was the same line, and it was different commercials, different songs, and it was the same exact lyric line. And I heard it like in 3 or 4 different commercials, different artists, different songs. And I'm like, when are they going to stop using this line? It might have been Look at Me or something like that. I think it was like Look at Me. And I heard like 3 different versions of that same title used in big commercials.
Amazing.
Like might have been last year. And I'm like, wow, that just keeps working. Whatever that, because it's simple.
Yeah.
And think about that. I thought about this. So Look at Me, that's a good one. Think about just the subconscious of that when I talk about turning towards the screen to look at the commercial. Look at me. You're literally telling people, look at me. Yeah, and it is a psychology, right? So if you're writing for commercial, I would think about those things. Because even if it's a subconscious thing on the ad agency's part or the buyer's part, they're going to like it for those reasons because they're just attracted to the song. And I'm sure they have a whole psychology of that, that they use when they make ads. If you ever watch like Mad Men or something, there's a psychology behind getting people to watch an ad or be attracted to a product. So
absolutely,
that's what again, we go back to our discussion. You're supporting that product. You're supporting something.
Right. Music is rarely the star.
Yeah, your song has to be pretty kick-ass, but it's still supporting. It's not necessarily a star. But what's interesting on the flip side is, and I was talking about this last weekend to people who are artists, is sometimes people will Shazam it. And all of a sudden your song on a commercial that had 10,000 Spotify plays goes to 100,000 Spotify plays.
Yeah.
I've seen that many times. The songs that are in movies, people will Shazam those. And the song that had nothing for Spotify will all of a sudden spike because people, what's the song? I like the song. So that can help your song too in other mediums.
I think the people at the company Shazam missed a great sonic branding opportunity when they started that company. Remember Gomer Pyle?
Yeah.
Shazam!
That's right.
They should have used that when you open the app and the logo pops up. It should have gone Shazam.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Yeah. Like what was it? Yahoo had that. Remember
Yeah,
that? Yahoo.
with the yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
that would have been a good marketer.
Yeah, send me a check, Shazam people.
Sign that one up.
Let's talk about the Taxi Road Rally, our annual conference. At lunch, you were talking about how you've met people via emails before, but not until you actually met them in the flesh at the Taxi Road Rally did you go ahead and sign them to your catalog. Can you elaborate on that whole thing?
Right, yeah. So there was an instance just this past rally where I had been back and forth. I think I had met her at the rally a couple times, and we talked, and her music was great, and she emailed me a few times, and I didn't really, it was one of those things where I kept thinking, yeah, I have to get back. I have to answer that email. But as we talked about, you get hundreds of emails, literally sometimes a day or a week for sure. And you want to get back to them. I even have folders I put emails in to get back, but stuff gets lost in the shuffle. And so I was at the mentor lunch this past year, and this girl came up to the table, and she was talking to me. I'm like, oh, yeah, and so we kind of knew each other. We built that relationship a little bit and recognized, oh, yeah, how you doing, and we talked. And then leaving the lunch, we talked a little bit. And I said, yeah, definitely make sure to resend me. I said, you probably sent me 10 emails, but send me an email with a subject line or something. And so she did, and I got home, and I got the email. I put it in a folder, and I did listen to it, and we eventually ended up signing, 10 of her songs.
Wow.
But it probably on her part, she probably looked at that was like a 2-year process. Because I probably met her 2 years ago, just at the rally somehow, maybe even through a friend. But it just took time, and it's a patience game, right? And so that's a prime example. And that happened to me on the flip side. I'd go to the rally, go to the mentor lunch, and back then it was CDs. We'd hand a CD, and wouldn't hear anything. I go back the next year, and I think the same library I handed a CD to, and 2 weeks later I got an email.
Wow.
And so it just took 2 years of going. It's that kind of, I called it the war of attrition. You just have to keep going back. And I think the more you show your face, what I did this year is, I almost felt bad. It's like, yeah, I've been meaning to get to this person's music.
Yeah.
And finally, it's like it comes down to you do it.
There's only so much time in your day, and eventually the guilt gets to you, and you act on it.
Or it just gets lost in the shuffle, and eventually just keeping it top of mind. And that's what happened with this lady, is that I eventually listened to the music, and now we got her in the library. So it's just, and I think there's something about that too that somebody like me recognizes, is this person's trying. They keep coming back. They're showing up like I did, and you can kind of relate to that too. So it's like you're going to give them a little more priority, a little more grace. So that probably is part of that, what happened there too. But it's a prime example of the rally. Like you ask me every year at the rally or on Taxi TV, what do you tell people who are at their first rally? And my kind of pat answer now is book your flight for the next one.
Yeah.
Because you have to just keep coming back. That's the key.
What about the people who have been Taxi members for 5 years or 10 years and have never come to a road rally? I've run out of ways to try and convince them how life-changing and career-changing it will be, because they think it's hype. They think it's marketing hype. But we don't charge for the rally. We don't make any money if you show up or you don't. It's really all about helping you in your career. So what would you say to somebody who's been a Taxi member, even for 6 months or 10 years, and they don't come to the road rally?
It's a great question. And the simple answer is you have to just go. It sounds oversimplified, but it's like you just have to go. I think doing the submissions and the listings is great. It's really an amazing way to find, libraries and placements. But I think it really amplifies all of that, especially so you're a Taxi member and you don't go to the rally. I think it's almost insanity, because it just goes so hand in hand with doing listings and doing, getting placements and getting libraries. Because my experience was this, and I've told you this several times, I was a Taxi member 15 or 20 years ago for about a year. Mm-hmm. Didn't go to the rally, did like 40 submissions. I think I got one forward, no placements, and I kind of gave up after a year and a half, something like that. I just kind of gave up on it. And then about 5 years later, I was in Nashville, and a couple of my friends were doing sync, and they were both Taxi members. And I joined again, and I did a lot of listings that year, but I went to the rally that year. The first year I rejoined, and it was a game changer. Game changer is kind of a light way to say it, because it changed everything. And the reason being because I had done listings for a year before. I had done listings the year that I joined again, and just so many light bulbs went off going to the rally of what I was doing. My place my odds got better on forwards the next year because I got it. Because I went to some of the classes and I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing wrong when I submit a song, or that's what I'm doing wrong listening, or that's what sync is looking for. Just what we just talked about a minute ago.
Right.
All of those things. It was just like this massive epiphany, and that was just going to the rally that first year. And even after that, the next year I did 80 submissions, I think. So it amped me up. It also inspired me. That's the other high thing that maybe I haven't talked about much, but just being at the rally, being around those people who are doing it, seeing the successful people with Taxi was so inspiring that the next year I did 80 submissions to Taxi. And
did you have a higher percentage of
I
forwards
did. I think
because of all those other
I had
things?
like 20 or 30 forwards, which is
Wow.
pretty good. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, for the first year I did I don't know how many submissions the first year was, probably 40, and I might have had 5 or 10, so which was still okay. But the second year, yeah, I did so many more submissions. And the other thing about that, in combination with the rally, is so let's say I did 80 submissions the second year and had 20 or 30 forwards. That means I had 80 songs to pick from to bring to the rally the next year, and play for the panels and play. So you're doing this. What would you call it? Like forward motion, or it's snowball, or like compound interest is
right.
what Chuck,
I like
Chuck
that.
calls it. Compound interest, because you're building this thing. And certainly after 2 or 3 years, I had like 200 or 300 songs. And then after the third year, I dove into instrumental music, because at the rally I'd heard a lot about that with Dean Krippain and people like that. And so I bought in. I'm like, I'm going to do instrumentals. And then I just really ramped into overdrive after like year 2 or 3. And I did like 700 or 800 instrumentals. I always tell you that on these, and that changed a lot. So it was just that combination of doing the listings, understanding that, and then coming to the rally and really getting it. And it's the perfect marriage, because when you're doing those listings and building that catalog, it's pretty amazing, because you're going to have a base of songs to pitch when you go to the rally and meet somebody from a library. So to me, it's the perfect combination, is do the listings all year long and go to the rally. And I got it after like 2 years. I've been going to the rally 10 years now, but I just kept doing it. And that combination of the rally and making songs for submissions. The other thing you talk about that's so key to like doing listings and submissions that still carries over into what I do now, 100%, is that you have a deadline.
Right.
Sometimes now my deadline's like, it's 9 a.m. Can you get it to me by 4?
Right.
With Taxi, at least you have a couple weeks sometimes for the listings.
Yeah,
but you still have
still
have a deadline, and that's something I never knew about before I joined Taxi, is writing to a deadline. And
Let's talk about that.
I mean, that improved my efficiency a lot, right? So
people often say, don't join Taxi until you have a catalog full of stuff to pitch. To which I would say, no, because you're not creating it for anything specific. You're just creating what you think may work in a TV show or film, even though you don't have much background or legitimate education as to what they really need for TV and film. So you go to the trouble of spending a year or 2 or 3 building this catalog that's worthless. I contend that you're better off joining Taxi with no music and be prepared to write to the brief. Whatever they ask for, create it for them and give it to them. You stand a much better chance of getting it licensed. The question is, how do you get good enough and fast enough? Because most musicians, if you say, write me a song, it could take them a month to 6 months to finish a song. Whereas an instrumental track, you can probably bang out 3, 4, 5 hours.
That's right. Yeah.
So how does somebody who's never worked in sync and is just becoming familiar with deadlines and writing to the brief, how can they get faster and better and more efficient?
I mean, that's a great question. Some of it is just by doing and just keep doing it and find your way, because everybody has a little different way of doing things. But I would say, and I tell this to everybody, actually, every artist I know, and I get a lot of cringes and a lot of eyes rolled. Learn production, no matter what. I mean, because a lot of people, it's like the business thing. A lot of people don't think that's fun. They just want to create a song or write lyrics or whatever. But I tell everybody, at least learn a level of production, some level. And I especially like artists who like to say somebody's a great singer. At least get to the point where you can send a producer or somebody a track with a drum beat, maybe a guitar or a synth showing me the chords and your vocal. if you send that to a producer, you're so far ahead to getting the song done than just sending them like a vocal voice memo or something. And then you got to figure out the chords. Right. I mean, think about that. So if you can get to at least a musical level and a production level where you can do a decent scratch track. And I've seen people, we know, JP was one of them, who was a straight up amazing writer, but didn't want anything to do with production, didn't know production. But now he's an amazing producer. And because he took the time to learn production.
And it didn't take him that long.
He got
really
into
didn't.
A year.
Started during COVID, I think, was when he got serious about it.
And just dove in, watch there's so many YouTube videos. There's, I don't know, have you done Taxi TV on like Logic? I don't think you've gotten
No,
those,
it's too hard for us to do like a split screen and the computer screen.
But there's so many people that do those, and there's, just, you have to filter through some of the content, but there's a lot of information out there on learning DAWs and learning Logic or Pro Tools or whatever it might be. But I always tell people that, because that's going to up your efficiency. Now, if you're really resistant to that, then you have to build a team, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to find somebody, if you're a singer and a songwriter, you have to find somebody who can produce quickly. So in order to maximize getting music out there and building tracks quickly, you have to, if you're not going to do it yourself, you have to build a great team. And I know I can think of a few people who are amazing teams, and they can get things to me even in 24 hours. So if you can do that, if you can build that kind of efficiency where you have a guy who is a producer, or a guy or gal who's a producer, and somebody who's a great songwriter, and you collaborate. So collaboration is key for that volume. I think another part of it that's interesting is, for me, it was letting go of perfectionism. I think Rob did a thing about letting go of precious, right? And that's so true. I had that syndrome. Every song had to be perfect before anybody heard it. And I think that's a killer, because I think part of that is just doing it all the time, and you get a little desensitized to where you can let songs go a little easier. But I was like, oh, the song isn't ready yet. It's not ready. And then it takes forever to finish a song.
I guarantee you that Hertz didn't rent one more car based on the fact that they didn't have a fourth note in the harmony stack
right.
on Let's Go.
Or the guitar was, I think, a little out of tune in that track, which was funny to me. But yeah, they didn't worry about it.
Just made it sound more indie.
Exactly. That's why they probably liked it, because it was raw. So it's funny how your mindset is, especially, I came out of music college. Yeah. So I thought music theory, everything has to be perfect in the right place. And to a degree, of course, it can't sound like craziness, but it depends on the style too. But I think that's another killer of volume or amount of music that you do. It's not necessarily quantity over quality or that kind of thing, because you can do quality and quantity. Mm-hmm. As we know, many Taxi members, I mean, people like Matt and John and people like that, they're doing amazing music, and they're doing a lot of it.
But that's because they just kept doing it.
Right.
You learn by doing.
Both Matt Vanderbilt and John Pearson, they've learned to produce too.
Yeah.
So that's an example.
And neither of them literally
knew
argument. Where the on button was when they started. They were that raw.
I mean, Matt even said something funny at the rally. He said something like, if somebody, like me, who was as dumb as I was about production, can get there, you can get there. Yeah. Because he said he literally didn't know anything.
He turned to everybody in the ballroom. I remember that. And he said, everybody in this room is better than me.
Yeah, that's crazy to think. Yeah, as successful as he is, and so but that shows you can get to that efficiency and volume. And in the sync world, you really do have to, in a way, if you're going to do get a lot of placements, or even let's say have a lot of songs in libraries, you're going to have a lot of music. Yeah, it's a numbers game.
But people get freaked out by that number. It's like they're Taxi members. They have 1,000, 3,000, 5,000 things in various libraries. And they literally put their tail between their leg and quit because they think, I can't do that.
It's daunting. It can be. I can
but yet those people did it. They started out just like you, and then they did it. So if they can do it, you can do it. They're not. I mean, I've met Matt Vanderbilt. We're actually very good friends. Matt is a very special guy because of his energy level and his personality. Yep. But on a musical level, he's not joking when he says everybody in this room is probably better than me. So it's not like he's some musical genius that came out of his mommy's womb with this magical ability to produce great tracks quickly.
Yeah, he learned how to put great tracks together, and John was kind of the same way with production. And the one thing I'll say is that with the production side of things, again, to me, it's either learn it like John did, or get a great team together. Work to your strengths. If you don't have the time, I understand people don't have time sometimes to do that. It's a time involved thing to learn production, But if you don't, then work on your strength as much as you can and get a good team going. And then you can produce songs together. I even know like teams, it's interesting. I know a couple teams of producers I work with, and one is in like Europe and one is over in California, and they can almost work 24 hours a day.
I think that's great.
One's sending a track out in the time zone difference, and the other's working on the track and sends it back in the morning, and they're just like, it's like a revolving door. And I think you can do that anywhere, right? The time zone helps them, but that's that team building and that collaboration. And another thing about the Rally, going back to that, is that I met so many collaborators and co-writers at the Rally. And what's really funny is, going back to John Pearson, he and I both live in Nashville, and we met at the Rally. And then we went back to Nashville and started writing together. And we started getting libraries together, placements together. But we wouldn't have met unless we were at the Rally, and we both live in the same town.
And you guys ended up with some like big TV commercials as a result of that relationship.
A bunch of stuff, a bunch of placements together. And that's building that team and that collaboration network, and just that's how you get more music out there. Me sitting in my own room when I first started with Taxi, I was still learning production in a way myself, and I couldn't get that much music out the door. And when I told you that my story of when I ramped up after 2 or 3 years and just almost became a machine, it took a lot of learning even then. Like I was spending a lot of time. I was kind of maybe a sad case because I didn't have a girlfriend at the time. I had a job. I was working like 6 to 8 hours a day, and I'd work my job and I'd come home and go in the studio for 6 hours.
Right.
And then all weekend I'd be in the studio. I didn't really have a life. I was just doing music, and that's a little bit unique.
But why do people think that they deserve the reward and the success without doing that? Because every single successful Taxi member I know has crammed in those extra hours after work. They've worked on weekends. It's like if you're not willing to do that stuff, then you probably just don't really want to be in the music business all that badly.
Right. Or even an example, like if you have a family and job, I know people who do that, but they get up an hour or two earlier in the morning when it's quiet, and they just go in the studio for an hour or two and get stuff done.
I mean, members that get up at 4:30 in the morning.
I remember you talking. Yeah, it's. I mean, that there are ways to do it if you really want to.
Yeah.
And there, of course, it's going to be a little longer, ramp up if you have limited time, but you can find those hours in the day somewhere, and. Chuck Schlachter, who we both know, he kind of introduced me to something early on because I had my job and I was busy. And I like kind of the Swiss cheese method, he called it, which means you got 20 minutes, before you're going to go out to dinner with a girlfriend or going to do something, get in the studio and finish that guitar track. And you're just filling the holes of a track. And you'd be amazed how much you can get done even with that kind of method. I used to think I had to be in the studio for 3 hours to get something done. But when I had to do that method, I would just go in there and finish that guitar track, and it took me 15 or 20 minutes. And then I'd come back the next day and finish the bass line. And it's still, at least I was getting stuff done. So even if you say you have limited time, you can use that kind of plug the hole method and get a lot of music done.
You know what?
So,
put that down.
Yeah.
Don't look at Instagram.
Stop scrolling.
Yeah. No Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter, no TikTok. Do that for a week, and you'll easily pick up 5 hours.
Yeah, or the 8 hours on Saturday that you binged that show.
Yeah.
That could have been 3 pieces of music. I mean, I know you're sacrificing something. That's the bottom line, right? That you said that if you really want to do it, it's probably going to be a sacrifice.
But why can't I just want it so badly that it happens just because I want it?
Right.
Oh, I feel for people. I wish that I could wave a magic wand and make that dream come true for people. But I've always said, Taxi doesn't sell dreams. We sell tools and an outlet for your music to people that already have the dream.
Yep.
So if they have the dream and they're willing to do the work, we can perform almost miraculous stuff for them. But most people have the dream and just aren't willing to do the work because they think that having a great idea for a great song or just having talent is enough.
Yeah.
It's not anymore.
It isn't. And we always talk about shortcuts and things, and I try to give shortcuts, but there really is no true shortcuts. I try to give ways, but the way I look at it, and we may have to do a Taxi TV, because I was going to say one of the things I wanted to introduce was, I won't do it here obviously, but I wanted to do the top 10 things I wish I knew 10 years ago when I started, because those are shortcuts. It's avoiding the pitfalls, things that you step into, and I've been starting to think about that I would love people to hear that, because I do wish I heard some of these things 10 years ago.
Let's do it. I mean, not right now, but
that would be a
in
good
like
subject.
I think in 2 weeks I have an opening.
Yeah,
for a
let's
show.
do that. But I think too, and I was just thinking about this kind of in a comic way. If you or I had a true shortcut to this, we'd probably be broadcasting from our yacht in the Greek islands right now because, it'd be worth millions.
Well,
there's just
my
no
yacht's in the
true short-
Bahamas, not the Greek islands.
Mine's in dry dock right now. But you know what I mean? It's like there's just not this magic bullet. And if I had it, I would be, probably a billionaire because it's just hard work and learning and finding that time, sacrificing, carving out that time. That's the, I guess, bad news or good news is that if you're willing to do it,
I always say people are fully aware and understand if somebody wants to be on the tour of the PGA playing the Masters, if somebody wants to be a quarterback for the Patriots, if somebody wants to be a champion Olympic swimmer, every single person on the planet knows that those people put in thousands of hours of practice time to get where they are.
Yeah.
But yet when it comes to music, there's this misconception that I was born with innate talent. I'm going to get lucky and write that one thing, just that one thing that's going to magically make everything go ba-boom, and my life will turn around.
Yeah.
I've not seen that in my entire, I hate to say it, but 50 years in the music industry. I've never seen it.
No, that's true. And the problem is, especially kind of to me in the sync world with that thinking, is that if you write that one thing, great, it takes off, you got to write the next one. And you're going to have to keep going. And it doesn't get much easier. You just have to keep working. And now the bar is higher and your deadlines are tighter. It's not going to get easier. That's, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but it's not going to be easier. It gets more, it's almost more work once you get to the level that you think that's where I want to be. And it's like, well, no, I want to be here. And there's just more work.
But then you turn 65 years old and you retire with a multi-six-figure income because you did 10 years of hard work on your way to 65.
There can be that nice payoff. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that's, those are all important points about that acceleration of it. It's just
momentum. That's a word at lunchtime. Something we're talking about, snowball effect or something. It's momentum.
Yeah.
That once you're constantly picking up speed and getting better at what you do more quickly because you're doing it repetitively.
Yep.
So what seems like a struggle right now to get one simple instrumental cue done in a day will be a laughable 90 minutes that you'll be able to do it in 2 years from now.
Yep.
Just because of repetition.
And I'll touch on one small thing there. I mean, I know we can go down the rabbit hole on these, but for me, it was doing different styles of music, let's say in instrumental world. I started to have templates. That's huge because every time I would do like trap tension because I met a library here at the Taxi Rally and they use trap tension a lot, and they started taking my music, so I started getting into doing trap tension, and I just had a template that I used. I'd open up Logic, and it was all the instruments I needed for that style of music. Sometimes I'd even recycle beats and mangle them a little bit that I'd used before. That saves 20, 30 minutes right there.
Right, because you're not sitting there scrolling.
Right. Once you do it, you have that template thing built up, and then somebody would need dramedy, which is kind of tension, but with a lot of times with clarinets are kind of silly. You hear it in like Kardashians and things like that. And so I did a lot of dramedy, and I had my dramedy templates, and they always had my clarinet sounds and my triangles and I never had to go looking for instruments anymore, and that saved me tons of time. And
that's probably half the time on HQ is just finding the instrument.
And then you're sitting down simply writing on a new melody, a new rhythm,
a new mood.
A new mood. And that's really what you're concentrating on instead. And then the production kind of goes to the side.
But it's funny, somebody who's new and is a rookie might hear you talk about templates and think, well, gosh, I can't use the same bass sound or the same drum sound on all or whatever, on my dramedy cues.
Right.
Because everybody will just see that I'm using a template. No, they won't, because the chances of somebody going, oh yes, after they've listened to 300 cues, they're not going to remember that 7 weeks ago they heard your other dramedy cue and it had the same, marimba sound.
No.
It's not going to happen.
It is it's a good point you bring up though, because your template is just a starting point. You can always change the sounds if you want to, but at least you can kind of recycle some of it. Now, if you're doing like sometimes if you get into the world of sync and you develop those relationships, libraries will come to you because they know you can do a certain style of music, and they'll say, can you do 10 of these? When you do that, you kind of do have to start getting more creative, and you have to stretch your templates, because you don't want all 10 to sound the
But
exact
you can't
same
go
thing.
too far from the center,
Exactly.
because then they won't like the other 9
Yeah,
things.
and it's fine if, let's say it's drum beat, it's fine if 3 or 4 of the 10 have clarinet. Nobody's going to call you on that, because
Right.
it's a common thing, or whatever, you're using strings, some kind of
Pizzicato,
staccato, pizzicato
yeah.
strings. Those are acceptable, and that's what's in that style. So it's still, again, that template will work. But you do want to mix up the vibes and the moods so they have choices if you do a whole collection. But you're right, if you're doing a song for a library and a song for a library here, they're never going to know.
Yeah.
So you can really emulate the sounds and recycle things that way. Obviously you don't want to recycle melodies. You don't want to recycle even drum beats. I'll mangle the drum beat a little bit, or change the hi-hat, whatever it might be. A lot of the kick patterns can stay the same sometimes. But yeah, those little things you learn, tricks, are when it seems like it takes, you said it earlier, it seems like it takes 2 hours or 3 hours to finish a cue like that. It'll all of a sudden be less than an hour.
Yeah.
And then you can get 3 done in 3 hours. That's huge.
And if you can do that 5 days a week,
Yep.
that's
It's
15
exponential.
cues times 50 weeks. Let's say you take 2 weeks for vacation,
Mm-hmm.
50 weeks times 15 cues a week. That's 750 cues in a year.
There you go. Yep.
You do that
that's-
for 5 years. You've got thousands of cues out there. You can almost just sit back and wait for retirement, because you're going to see the income
Get it,
get its own momentum. First year you might make 12 grand, the next year 24 grand, the next year 38, and that just starts getting bigger and bigger.
Yep. And the key there, of course, and this is a hard master class on this, but a lot of it's trial and error, is getting into the right libraries.
Yeah.
Finding the libraries that, number one, are a fit for your music and are actively active. Not actively pitching, let's say, but
Let me
active.
start out with a header on that one. There's that. How do you know which music libraries are the right ones for different types of music that you make?
Well, I'll start with the Rally. Because at the Rally, what I found is I could literally sit down with that library owner at the lunch or in my mentor session and say, what do you guys need? Or what styles do your clients use? And again, I wouldn't be able to do that. Where else would I do that?
And that's the key question. What kinds of music? I've seen taxi members get so excited that they sign everything they make with the first library that gives them a hug and a kiss and says, we love your music. So now they're putting songs with lyrics in a library that gets 95% of their placements are instrumental music and unscripted reality TV.
Yep.
So those songs that they put so much effort in are going to sit on the virtual shelf because that library doesn't have the right clients. Whereas at the Road Rally, you could meet another library that barely touches reality TV. It does a lot of hour-long stuff and songs with lyrics, heartfelt songs with lyrics get used all the time.
Their clients do that, and that's the trick, is and a lot of that's just trial and error and discovering, at the Rally, and asking firsthand, what kind of music should I send you? And it's kind of a natural, organic thing that happens, because this happened with me for sure. One of the company I mentioned earlier that took the CDs, I sent them just 10 songs. They said send us 10, and I sent 10, and they were all different styles, and they took 3. And the next month I sent them 10 more, and they took 3, and I'm like, well, those are very similar. So the next month I sent them 10, and 8 of those were very similar to that style, and they took 6 or 7. And so, and they were a good library, and I got a lot of placements with them, but I knew what they needed just by that organic
You were
process
so smart to
of what
pick
they
up
were
on
taking.
that, though.
Yeah. And, they weren't taking any singer-songwriter. They weren't taking many vocal things. They took a few. But, that's trial and error and learning your libraries just through process of that. But yeah, the Rally's great for that. And here's one more thing I just thought of is, if you start collaborating, like I collaborated with John Pearson, he would get into a particular library, and he and I are co-writing, and he'd be like, oh, I know they're looking for this. So you learn from other people who have been doing it, or somebody like a Matt. If they're in a library, if you get to know them in relationships, certainly if you write with them, well, what do you think this library likes? And they've been doing great for you. Well, let's write some of that.
We talked about it at the Rally. I had you on a panel called How to Get Into Sync's Inner Circle.
Yep.
And all of you guys were great. That panel was spectacularly good. And all you guys talked about how initially you might meet somebody who is not a player, who is not that on the radar of all the libraries, but you become friends standing in line waiting to get your badge, or at the mentor lunch, or over a beer at the bar at night. But then that person had a previous relationship from the year before, and now you're brought into that circle of friends. So and then at this Rally, you meet somebody that other person you met doesn't know. And eventually, it's somebody, it might have been you on the panel, said it's kind of like a Venn diagram where here's my circle of friends, here's your circle of friends, and at some point they overlap in the middle, and that's where the money happens.
Yeah. It really is. And that happens to me. I've been going to the Rally 10 years. It still happens to me. I met somebody this year who does like really great industrial rock, and I don't really do that. And I'm like, well, let's talk. I might have some places I know that we can work. And they came into my circle that way because they offered something that I wasn't having.
Yeah.
Didn't have. So those circles intersect with everybody at the Rally. Again, so many more reasons here, but the reasons to go to the Rally you asked originally is like that whole inner circle thing that we talked about. It is, and I didn't realize it was called a Venn diagram, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's all these kind of circles that start intersecting. And sometimes it takes a while too. Like you want to meet this person at the first rally you go to, but I've done that and I haven't really talked to that person for 3 years later, and now I'm working with them. So it's again a patience game. But yeah, those things definitely intersect, and that's where you start. And just listening. Oh, what library is that? You like that library, and you write with somebody, and a lot of times it's hard to get in the library, but if you co-write with somebody that's already in, then you're in. If they like what you're doing, they might call out to you. So it's just all of that relationship building, I guess is what it boils down to. But yeah, great point is that you just keep meeting people and doing that. That's probably the best way.
We have to beg people to come to the free road rally. It blows my mind.
It is.
There's all this magical stuff, life-changing stuff.
Yep.
Everybody that goes there, literally everybody says, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea how life-changing it could be," and yet, 90% of our members or whatever it is don't go. Maybe they think it's all hype or it's all BS, and they just can't imagine anything could be that good.
Yeah.
But they're missing out on a life-changing, certainly a career-changing opportunity by going, I don't want to drop $300 on a plane flight and stay in a hotel for 3 nights. Or I might walk in the door and not know anybody. I'm going to feel so weird and standoffish and left out, which I think is the opposite of the way people are greeted at the rally.
That's the other thing. Yeah, it's so welcoming and so personable. And even though it's quite a few people, I mean, it's a pretty big event, but it still feels, part of it I think for me is because I've been going for 10 years and I know a lot of people and it feels very much like home. I love it.
Yeah.
But the first couple of years, I won't lie, I was pretty overwhelmed and kind of like the deer in the headlight, like what the heck? I mean, I liked it, but at the same time I was like.
But it's not scary, right?
No,
that's what people
it was
are
more
afraid.
overwhelming and just like how do I go to all the classes? There's so many classes, so I wanted to go to them all, but I had to pick and choose.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about booking your flight for the next one. Go this year and go to the ones you can go to, and then next year you'll catch some other ones that are about different subjects. There's so much great information. You're not going to be able to do it all. But that was one thing that took me a couple rallies to get.
Yeah.
It was like I had to pace myself instead of trying to do it all. And I enjoyed the second and third rally much more because I just realized I can't do it all. I'm just going to keep coming back. And I had committed by that point I was not going to miss one. At that point I was like, I'm just going to go to this every year.
Think about this. Do the math on the rally, days-wise. So let's say that you spend 3.5 days per rally, and you go for 5 years in a row. So now you have spent 3.5 times 5 is 17.5 days. 5 years, 5 road rallies is enough to get a pretty darn good education and build a great network of people in 17.5 total days. If you went to any of the major music colleges and went to class for 17.5 8-hour days, you wouldn't learn a fraction of what you'll accomplish at the road rally.
Yeah, never mind making the connections, having the opportunities, and and not. I went to college, not to disparage college, but real world. Opportunities and real world experience.
Yeah.
There's nothing that beats that. That's why, think about college, the way it's set up is so many people, in the music industry is a prime example, so many people end up interning out of college, and that's where their real career starts. And that's where college was an advantage, is they learn their craft to an amount in college, and then they started interning in the kind of real world. And that's where I think Taxi has it, is it's the real world and education at the same time.
And crammed into a very tight circle of people. So it's not like being on a campus of 20,000 people and there are 8 other guys that are into model rocketry.
Right.
This is everybody is involved in the same thing.
Right.
So if you're like an
that's
atom
true.
bouncing off of other molecules or atoms, everything you hit is going to be somehow related to the goal that you all share.
And that is the other thing, actually. And I guess for me, it went what I was saying, but it's a great point, is everybody's so like-minded at the rally. It's inspiring. Like I said, the first year I went, and certainly the second year, I just came off it, and I was like just so inspired that I just wanted to be in the studio and making more music. So that's, to me, a huge part of it. Actually, from my experience, was just that refueling once a year. Because you get into the work, even now I get in the work world, I'm working 8, 10, 15 hours a day sometimes. And when I go to the rally, I feel renewed and ready to just get out there and get at it.
I'm always amazed how so many of you say that same thing, that you come away from the rally like you just drank a case of Red Bull, just full of energy to forge forward and get this stuff done. I'm amazed that people can maintain that for more than a week or 2 or 3, but they do. And that's enviable.
Yeah, it carries quite a while, and probably about till the end of the next year, when you're kind of feeling like, and then you get the recharge. And it is. It's a recharge, is a good way to put it for me. Every year, and just it's inspiring. Like I said, I'm on my 10th rally, and it's just I won't miss one.
Wow.
So it's bottom line, for you asked earlier, for people who are members and haven't gone, it's to me, you have to go. You just have to attend it one way or the other. Get yourself there, and I don't think you'll ever not want to go again. It's that great, and on so many levels. So
I'm so glad that it's worked out that well for you, and it does for most people. Even people that go there with kind of a bad attitude, it's like, there's no way this could work out for me. Most of them come away feeling great. There are a few that have been successful in hibernating in a corner, or keeping their bad attitude chip on the shoulder the whole weekend, and then they go home with the same chip still on their shoulder. But the vast majority of people come away changed.
Yeah. And one thing I will say, because I just thought of this, and I want to be real about this, the first rally or two, it wasn't as inspiring, because there was a lot of overwhelm. How the hell? I mean, there's so much great music, and how the heck am I going to do this? There was a lot of that doubt that came in a way, and I think you have to push that aside a little bit. Number one, the vibe and the supportiveness at the rally helps get rid of some of that. But there still was that in my mind of, wow, this is a lot. It's a lot of work. And I knew I just knew in my own estimation that to get my music at the time when I first went to the rally to where it needed to be sync ready and really going to make it, I knew there was a big mountain there to climb. And that is a little overwhelming. I think a lot of people would feel that. But again, just come back the next year, do the listings during the year, and keep slugging away at it. That was really my experience the first couple of years. And I think the inspiration from the rally really kicked in after the second or third year, when I started to get it. And I started to get into libraries, and I'm like, oh, this is working. And then I was just ready to roll. But those first couple of rallies, if you've never done it, can be a little bit daunting and overwhelming. It's cool that the vibe and the supportiveness is there at the rally. But I do remember walking away thinking, oh, wow.
Really?
This is going to be a lot. I have a long way to go to really get this together. Because you hear music on the panels, and it's amazing. Like that first year, maybe it was unique, but every song and every panel I went to, I was like, these are all like hit records. What's going on? It was like just. I mean, I think that's every year at the rally, but my first year was extraordinary. Maybe it was because of my level wasn't quite there yet. I just remember thinking, wow, I got to go home and learn about this stuff.
I get calls after the rally every year from industry professionals that are on the panels, and every single year they call and say, oh my God, I was on a panel here 15 years ago. Some of the music was good, a lot of it not so good. The quality of the music that I'm hearing year after year now is so much better. And that's because of the persistent education and re-education of our members who keep coming back to the rally and watch Taxi TV. They have gotten better.
Yeah.
And that's what, Taxi is not just a company of creating connections and opportunities for people. It's preparing you to be ready for those connections and opportunities. Because I could introduce any musician in the world to a music supervisor in a half hour by making a phone call. 99.9% of them would blow the opportunity because they don't know how to communicate with a supervisor. Right. They don't know how to listen to what a supervisor is actually looking for. They wouldn't send their music prepared the right way. They wouldn't sign the right paperwork on the right within a time. There are a million ways to blow that relationship. So we see that as a big part of our mission at Taxi, is to not only help you get the deal and get the placement, but to help you be prepared for that moment.
Yeah. And that's another great point that we haven't even brought up yet, is that at the rally, for example, it's the place to ask questions. If you're new to this, go up to somebody and ask, well, what's a split sheet? What's this? People will talk to you if they know about
won't
it.
I feel embarrassed?
No, that's the thing. That is the place to ask. You don't want to be asking a library that. Right. And so it's the perfect place to make those mistakes and ask those questions. And that is like the supportiveness that I talked about, and just go to the classes and listen to people talk about it. But it's the perfect place to ask a fellow member who's been there for a long time. You can do that in the forums too, right? I mean, you don't have to just go to the rally with those questions. You don't have to wait a year, and get on the forums and ask. People will let you know if you don't. I mean, there's no embarrassment. We've all been there. And so that's another key thing, is ask those questions, make those mistakes at the rally.
You have all been there. That is the most important thing you've said all day today, Jim.
100%.
Everybody has been there.
Yep.
Everybody. I have yet to meet a Taxi member that was born with a Mozart-like or Beethoven-like gift.
No.
These people, got to turn on my in-session light so they know to be quiet in the hallway. It's everybody starts out the same, which there's varying levels of guitar playing ability,
or production ability.
But everybody is still starting out on square one, and there's some things that they don't know.
Right.
Nobody knows all of it.
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
Absolutely nobody.
Yep. And that was the one thing about those first couple of rallies I just talked about, is my attitude. I might have been a little overwhelmed and a little bummed out in some ways, but my attitude was also, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
I wanted to go home. It was probably a little less of being inspired to go home and work, but it was more with my butt kicked, realizing I had to go home and had a lot of work to do. So that's maybe the mindset too. But again, at the rally, ask those questions and then go home and work on it. Or I would overhear conversations, and I wouldn't ask a question, but I'd write it down on my phone, and I'd go home and research it. What are they talking about?
Wow.
Split sheets, or it may not have been split sheets, but whatever it was, I was like, what are they talking about? Oh yeah, I got to write that down. And I wouldn't, not to not look dumb, but I just didn't want to interject in a conversation. Or it wasn't appropriate.
Didn't want to break.
But there's so much that kind of learning by organic or osmosis or whatever you want to call it that goes on.
And nobody will laugh at you because they started on square one
not
too.
At all.
Whereas a library owner might go, okay, I'm not going to sign this person because there's going to be a lot of work.
They don't have the time. It's not even personal.
But
it's just
a fellow member, no matter, and it's the seriously successful members that are incredibly generous with their time, because they're grateful that they, over the last 5 or 10 years, have climbed to this position of getting a lot of placements and starting to earn a real income doing it. And knowing that they're kind of set for life, they will be generous with their time because they were on square one the first time they walked through the door there too.
Yep, absolutely. It is. It's that community of kind of, I don't know, you could pay it forward is the old saying, but it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody gets it. I totally get it. When somebody goes there and I can tell it's their first rally, I'll intentionally walk up to them and start talking to them because I can tell they're a little uncomfortable. Because I totally see myself standing there 10 years ago, oh God, who would I talk to?
And you're pretty personable. I mean, you might not be the most outgoing. Right. You're not Matt Vanderbilt. Matt is a 12 on a scale of 10 for being outgoing. Yeah. But you're not a shrinking violet.
Right. No,
you're like a regular guy.
Well, it's funny because I might have been more so at my first rally or two. Maybe it helped me come out of my shell a little bit more.
Wow.
I think it helped me in that realm, learning to talk to people and network, whatever you want to call it. I think it helped that too. I learned a lot of that from the rally. But yeah, it is interesting because you can kind of see the people who there are a little uncomfortable or new. Mm-hmm. And certainly if somebody comes up and asks me a question, unless I'm super busy or on my way to a panel, I'll answer a question. And I know 9 out of 10, everybody else that's been around as long as I have will do the same.
Absolutely.
So again, it's just another one of those ways you learn at the rally and through the whole process of it. So, I mean, it's Bottom line, if you're a taxi member, you have to go. That's the best I can do. That's the best advice I can give in the world. It's just you have to go to it.
By the way, he didn't get prepped for any of this today. I literally, he showed up. He called me yesterday or day before. I'm going to be in town for a couple of days. Got any time? I said, yeah, come on out. Let's go grab lunch. And I was literally working on my green screen lighting this morning. And when he showed up, and I said, hey, you know what? You want to sit down and just chit chat about anything that pops into our heads, or go to lunch first? And so we decided to go to lunch, come back and do this. So he was not prepped. He was not asked to, plug the rally or anything. So thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. And I will see you at the rally.
All right. See you there.
Thanks. Jim Thacker, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to Jim Thacker. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Come back next week for what I know is a killer episode, because I've already taped it. It's going to be all about titles, stuff that you've never heard before, and I hope you enjoy it. Bye-bye.